Hi, hello, hi, hello, hi, hi, hello, hello. Okay, so I'm going to teach you guys and talk about how to make worm tea. And the special thing about worm tea for a garden is that it's a way to brew your own fertilizer, which is plant food. So it becomes super useful when you're gardening and you don't want to have to buy your own fertilizers, or if you're trying to take it easy on nature and use the things that are in your own home to help feed your plants. Then it's a really good practice, and it's one that I've had a lot of fun learning. But it all starts with worm castings. So I'm going to show you the process of how I make my own worm castings first. This is my vermicompost, which is just a fancy way to say worm compost bin. And I made this guy just out of like a couple of tubs and some wood, and I drilled some holes in it for drainage, but it was super easy to make. It has two parts. It drains like all of the liquid into there, and then I have two sides. One where I put new food in, and then this one is like the old stuff. So below these leaves here is just all worm castings, which worm casting is really just another fancy word for worm poop, but it's a good thing. It seems like it wouldn't, but it is. So this is how I make worm castings. Is I feed them my food and they eat it, and then out comes like the most like amazing environmental fertilizer and natural fertilizer. So I don't really have to put anything in it other than stuff that I eat or stuff that comes from trees like leaves. So it's super easy. So they all like to live at the bottom because they don't like light. And they just congregate around the food and they slowly eat it and make most perfect worm castings. One of the super exciting things about making worm castings and compost tea is the fact that worms are this amazing super being that can take all the things that we produce in our house in terms of food, and they can turn it into soil again. And it's just a super great way if you wanted to get into worm castings and doing a vermicompost. It's a great way to keep our food out of landfills, and it's a good way to be more environmentally conscious, because basically you have like your own system turning our food and our waste into dirt again so that we can use them in our gardens. And it's very exciting. That's all. The worm tea, it's kind of like brewing the tea that we drink. I'm gonna have this massive tea bag that I fill with worm castings, and then I am gonna have this whole bucket full of water, and I'm gonna put the tea bag of worm castings in here. The important part for making worm tea is making sure that there's oxygen in the water, because the good bacteria that we want to promote, they need oxygen and the bad bacteria don't. So we're going to have this little air pump system that makes sure that there's oxygen and air in the water the whole time while it's brewing. The way that I am getting air into the water is I glued a tube that goes down and spirals into the bottom of the bucket, and I poked a bunch of holes in it so my air pump will push air through the tube, and then as it goes around the tube, it'll just start to come out and bubble in the water. So I'm going to plug in the air pump and see if it works. Bubbles! Okay, and then the next part, I recently harvested worm castings from my worm bin, and so instead of using my worm castings, I'm using some worm castings that I have purchased. I prefer to use mine, but sometimes I need more than I can make. I have been aerating it for a little while now, because we actually, in our drinking water, we have certain qualities to it that can actually kill bacteria. For example, some tap water has chlorine in it, and it's not good for the bacteria that we're trying to promote. So by letting the air bubbles circulate for a little while, it's effectively getting rid of those things that will kill the bacteria that we're trying to promote. Because one of the reasons that we're brewing the worm castings is worm castings coming from the worm have a lot of really, really good things and bacteria for the plants, and we're wanting to make those multiply by giving them food and a place to live, and so a way for us to spread it around the garden. We're going to put in a food source for those bacteria, which is molasses. So I'm going to pour a little bit of this in, which is actually one of my favorite parts because it's really pretty because it turns into a little string. So that's going to be the food for all of the good babies that we're brewing. We have air so that they can breathe, and water so they can survive. And now we're going to fill the tea bag with a few cups of the worm castings. And this is the tea bag that we're going to set in the water to brew. So I'm probably going to do like 4 coffee mugs or partial coffee mugs. Okay. I'm clearly very precise. Alright. So we have food, water, and a place for the bacteria to grow and live. And again, we're trying to promote the good ones, so we have to make sure that there's lots of air in there, and I see lots of air bubbles. So I'm going to put in this tea bag to steep. And it turns brown pretty quickly, so you know that it's starting to work. Alright, and then we let that brew for approximately 24 hours, and then we'll come back to it. I'm going to leave a lid on it so no debris falls in, and we're going to leave it for a day. Okay, so it's been 24 hours, so we're going to take a little look at the tea that we brewed. So we can see we've got a brown colored tea liquid. The air bubbles are still going, so we know we've got the good bacteria in there, not the bad bacteria. And we can start to scoop this out and put it in our watering can and water the garden. So I've got my handy dandy compost tea mug, and I'm going to start scooping a couple of these guys into my watering can. I'm going to try and fill this guy up about halfway, and then I'll fill the rest up with water, and then I get to feed my garden. I'm really excited to do this because I think that a lot of my plants are wanting to bloom more, and they just need a little extra nutrition. All right, here goes our other half. Drink up, little baby. Can't forget about the sunflowers. All right, well that is about the conclusion, but thank you guys so much for joining me, and if you have any questions, always feel free to ask, but have a great rest of your camp.